flush from the pocket. Throws it. Ball is out. Into the hands of Golden. Still on his feet. Golden to the 35. The 40. He's got a wall of blocker. He may go. Touchdown.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome to our Week 10 preview for the Pac-12 Conference, along with former UCLA Bruin J.J. Stokes, Roxy Bernstein with you. Another exciting week of Pac-12 football to look forward to. But first, let's look back at last weekend and a game for the ages, an epic game down in Los Angeles between Stanford and USC. And it's not very often, J.J., a game can live up to the hype, but this one certainly did. And if you were a fan, just a college football fan, a casual fan, you really had to enjoy the ball game at the Coliseum Saturday night.
There's no doubt you had to enjoy that. And it's a tale of two halves. First half, it was all defense, 10-7 at halftime. They came out, they were maneuvering and posturing and finding out a lot about each other. And in that second half, they made the corrective changes and went out and had an offensive explosion. And then you've got to talk about overtime. What more can you ask for? I mean, that was something special that we witnessed last Saturday.
It was like a heavyweight fight, and between two champions going toe-to-toe, that's what it was, and that's what I felt like walking out of the LA Coliseum Saturday night. Matt Barkley for one side, Andrew Luck coming from the other, and it was just, it came down to almost who had the ball last, and you knew it was going to be that kind of game.
Yeah, you anticipate that game because they have so many playmakers. With Andrew Luck, he spreads the wealth out to everybody. Same with Matt Barkley. These guys are going back and forth, and like you said, who has the ball last or who's going to make the mistake? And it was unfortunate that SC did, but they did at a crucial point in overtime, and it cost them the game.
Also from last week, we have some hardware to hand out as the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week from the Huskies. Chris Polk, another 100-yard game for him, 7 out of 8 this year. His 18th career 100-yard rushing game. Had 144 yards on the ground against Arizona. Receiving, he had 100 yards, and he scored 5 touchdowns. You want to talk about doing it all, that's Chris Polk.
Yeah, that's amazing to score 5 touchdowns. I mean, if you can score 2 or 3 touchdowns in a game, you've had a fantastic. I don't even know if there's a word for 5 touchdowns in one game. Superb, I guess I could use. But, I mean, this guy does it all. Over 100, both rushing and receiving. That is a special player.
And the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week is a freshman, as Tevin McDonald, the young UCLA safety, had 3 interceptions in the Bruins win over California. In fact, he's just the 4th freshman ever in conference history to have 3 interceptions in the same game. You called the game on TV. What did you see from Tevin McDonald?
You know, Tevin had a tendency to try to do more than was asked of him, and I think talking to the coaches, they said just calm down and play within the confines of our defensive scheme, and I think he did just that. And he's a hustle guy, he's an effort guy, and he had got a lot of benefit out of just being around the football. 2 of them were tips and popped into his hands, so he was fortunate that way, but he was attacking the football at all times, and it came up big for him for UCLA on Saturday.
Well, the schedule ahead for this week starts Friday night for the Pac-12 Conference in Boulder, Colorado, as USC travels to Colorado, a game that can be seen 7 o'clock Mountain, 6 o'clock Pacific on ESPN, as the Trojans try to bounce back from the triple overtime heartbreaker against Stanford, but they may have stumbled across a running back. Mark Tyler's been banged up. Curtis McNeil had a tremendous effort, a career-high rushing performance against Stanford. USC, even though they're 6-2, but they're really playing like one of the better teams in the country.
There's no doubt they're playing, especially when you have a quarterback, a running game, and a passing game. Those are keys in being a successful team. And you look at what McNeil did, came in and sparked in the second half. He's a guy that is a game changer. He just needs to continue to hold on to that football. He can have a huge impact on the game.
Then the action resumes on Saturday at 12:30. An ABC game as Stanford visits Corvallis to take on Oregon State as the number 4 Cardinal with the nation's longest winning streak. 16 games goes in to take on Mike Riley's team, and Andrew Luck, 3 more touchdown passes, a team that really is clicking offensively. And yeah, their defense got exposed a little bit, but this is a team that just finds a way to win. And when the chips are down like it was, the Stanford Cardinals showed how much character they have in that win against USC.
They did. There's no question that they did. Coming from behind, and especially when it looked like things weren't going their way, they were still able to fight through it. I think when I look at Stanford, one of the biggest things that steps out at me right now is after an emotional win like that, can they come around a week later and get just as emotionally high against an Oregon State team? I think that's going to be a big key for that Stanford football team.
And you mentioned the emotions, JJ, because not only coming off this USC win for Stanford, I don't necessarily want to call this the trap game for the Cardinal, but they have Oregon coming up right after Oregon State, November 12th, so there might be a lot of people wondering where's Stanford mentally heading into this game with Oregon State.
And that's a viable question. I mean, you have to take a look at that this week playing Oregon State, a team that plays much better at home than they do on the road. I think they're going to try to wear them down likewise. And then, like you said, to go in and face an Oregon team a week later, I mean, they have to be mentally tough and emotionally tough because these next 2 weeks are going to be trying for the Stanford team.
Coming up at 4:30 on Versus is Arizona State, UCLA, a clash in the Pac-12 South, JJ, where maybe the Pac-12 South title on the line and a berth in the inaugural Pac-12 championship game between Arizona State playing UCLA at the Rose Bowl. The Bruins, a huge win against Cal last week, 31-14. Kevin Prince, a monster game. But Arizona State, 48-14 winners over Colorado. Two teams that are riding high into a big conference matchup on Saturday.
Yeah, you look at Arizona State, a team that throws the ball well with Brock Osweiler. You know, you have Gerald Robinson. He likes to get the ball out to those guys. And if you take a look at the balance of that team right now, they're running the ball with Cameron Marshall. I think he had 3 touchdowns this past week. So, I mean, they're getting it done, and the balance is the key for this Arizona State team.
Key matchup in this game could be UCLA quarterback Kevin Prince, who ran for more than 160 yards against Cal last Saturday against the stud middle linebacker for Arizona State. Vontaze Burfict, maybe whoever wins that matchup, JJ, that'll give a big edge to who wins this game?
I think it will. You have to look at what Kevin Prince did last week. He made sound decisions. Now, can he be consistent with those decisions? But he's going to be facing a much tougher linebacking core led by Vontaze Burfict, and that's going to test this team. Can they jump the hump? Can they be successful 2 weeks in a row?
Then coming up at 7:30 on FSN, it's number 8 Oregon at 7-1 taking on 6-2 Washington in Seattle. A huge rivalry game at Husky Stadium. A lot riding on the line for both sides. For Oregon, another 40-point performance. In fact, Kenyon Barner went for his 3rd consecutive 100-yard rushing game. Michael James returned for Oregon in the game against Washington State. So did Darren Thomas, and they didn't play the whole game, but didn't really seem to matter as the Oregon Ducks just keep rolling.
It does. And you look at Oregon, you have Darren Thomas stepping in, you have LaMichael James stepping in. I think this is strategic because they face a tough Stanford team next week. But you have to look at Kenyon Barner and DeAnthony Thomas. These guys are really stepping their game up and making it easier for the transition in the long term. They're playmakers. And when you're DeAnthony Thomas, 262 all-purpose yards, that's pretty special as a freshman. So they know they have him to rely on.
And a 93-yard kickoff return for Thomas in the game against Washington State. Now for the Huskies, they're coming off a tremendous offensive performance from Chris Polk against Arizona. How much will they fuel off the home crowd and being at home in this rivalry contest with Oregon?
You know, they're fortunate enough to play this game at home. I think when you play at home, it's that comfort level, and Washington will have that comfort level. Keith Price is going to be a key component, though, right now. You have Chris Polk running the ball well, receiving the ball well. Can Tremaine Kearse step up and make plays likewise? But it's all going to rely on Keith Price. How comfortable can he be against this Oregon defense?
Price's first career start was last year against Oregon at Autzen Stadium. Also coming up Saturday at 3:30, you can see it on Root Sports up in the Northwest, or Comcast Sportsnet California in the Bay Area. Washington State, California, two teams that are still trying to fight for bowl eligibility, and a lot riding on this one for both the Cougs and the Golden Bears.
There is, and you take a look at Washington State. They are trying to get back in the mix. They're starting to settle back in. They haven't played as well as of late, but with Lovestall and Marquise Wilson, those guys need to make a connection to move this team forward.
Turnovers killed California last week against UCLA. What do they need to do to take better care of the football?
You know, when you look at Zach Maynard, he's a guy that gets a little excited and gets antsy. If he can just settle down and slow the game down and not try to do too much. I mean, you have playmakers. You have Marvin Jones, you have Keenan Allen, you have Issy Sofele, and you have Anthony Miller. Those are a lot of playmakers. Just settle down and distribute the football.
And the final conference game for the weekend in the Pac-12 as Utah visits Arizona. Game you can see at 5 o'clock Mountain, 4 Pacific, KJZZ TV in Salt Lake City, and also FSN Arizona. The Utes, the Wildcats, Utah getting their first Pac-12 conference win, 27-8 over Oregon State in Salt Lake City this past Saturday. And they're still striving toward bowl eligibility, and they've got some momentum after this nice win.
Yeah, it was a nice win. And when you look at who they face next in Arizona, you look at Utah, a run-dominated team versus a pass-dominated team in Arizona. And it's that classic thing. Which can win the football game? Everybody likes to say you win with the running game, but in this day and era, you never know. So it's a classic case of run versus pass, and it's going to be an exciting game to watch.
And a good defensive football team in the Utah Utes. We'll be back next week to take a look at Week 11 in the conference, which should be a huge weekend for Pac-12 football and a big clash in Palo Alto as Oregon takes on Stanford. So for J.J. Stokes, Roxy Bernstein, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right here next week for your Pac-12 football preview.